Now usually the last thing that I'll add to a 3D scene is depth of field, and that allows me just to create much more of a feeling of depth. Now here we have our characters and we have some rotating cogwheels, and I've added some text in there as well. Made the ground a little bit more reflective. Now we can't see the reflections at the moment or much of the detail because we're in draft 3D. But what we're going to do is set up our initial depth of field in draft 3D, and then I'm going to show you how it looks in a final render, which tends to be my workflow. Okay, so the other thing that we're going to do is actually just attach these characters to the wheels so that they rotate with the wheels. Now I've already applied auto orient to these, and if you want to follow along with this tutorial, you can open up the same comp as I have, depth of field AEP, and I'm in the depth of field comp. So what I'm going to do is select these girls, and I've grouped them into colours, which makes it easy for me to select them. So I'm going to select the ones on this wheel, and I'm going to parent them to the red cog, which is that one. And then the blue ones, I'm going to parent to the blue cog. Okay, just did that to make it easier for me to know which one to select. So we want that one. So now when we preview it, you'll notice that they rotate with the cog, which gives us a really nice effect. Now what I want to happen is I want the ones at the front to be in focus, and as they move to the back, they go a little bit out of focus, which mimics the kind of real depth of field effect that you get with real cameras. Okay, you'll notice with it auto-orienting towards the camera, we get a really nice effect. Looks like they really do exist within that 3D space. So what we're going to do is first of all get our camera. Now here's our camera, and if I close all these panels so that I've got enough space for multiple views, we can start to work in multiple views up here in the main window. So let's just close a few of them and go to 2 views in my main composition panel. And what we're going to do is view the active camera view there, and on this one we're going to view the top view. And if I select my camera, we can see the pyramid that represents the field of view. Now if I double click my camera to open up the settings, what I can do in here is enable depth of field. And as soon as I do, I get a focus distance value. Now at the moment, the focus distance is at the end of the field of view. But if I scrub that value, you'll notice, well, at the moment, lock to zoom is switched on. If I turn off lock to zoom, then I can adjust the focus distance separately from the zoom value. So I can decide what is and what isn't in focus in my scene. Now normally I want to see that render as I'm making changes, and in this situation I want to get a rough idea of how that's going to look. So what I'm going to do very quickly is just switch off the previews and put final quality on, just so I can get an idea of how much blur I'm going to need. Okay, and I don't have a lot of blur, so I'm going to go into my camera settings and just very quickly adjust the aperture settings. Now if I put that up to something like 100, we'll start to notice a lot of depth of field blur in this scene. Let me just check. We are on full resolution. Now we also want to make sure that this composition is on final resolution, but this one isn't, so we want off final quality as our setting for this comp. This one can remain draft 3D, fast draft. So we can have separate settings for each of our views. Now, as I said, it is a little bit, you have to be a little bit patient working with 3D. Anyone that's worked with 3D applications before will be familiar with this. A couple of little tips for you. If you find that it's just taking far too long to render, you can drop down to half resolution, and if you're viewing it at 25 or 50%, then dropping down to half resolution is absolutely fine. You're still going to see good quality. The other thing that you can do is you can use your region of interest button. So you could click on region of interest and then just select an area that you want to work with in the main composition. Now I've just gone and selected the wrong button, but if we select the region of interest button, and I'm going to hit caps lock, and that will stop this updating. click on my region of interest button, and then I can just determine an area that I want to render, so I'm not having to render the whole composition. But you can see that that's giving me enough information to be able to set my aperture. I'm going to set it to about 50. I think current setting is too much, and I have to release caps lock in order to see that rendering. So once I've determined that, I can go back to Fast Draft View, and I can switch off my region of interest, and I can start now animating my region of interest if I want to. So now what I can do is select a layer. So let's select the text layer, for example, and then select my camera layer. So Control click on Windows or Command click on the Mac. And instead of manually dragging that value, which would take a long time to update, what I can do is just go to Layer, Camera, Set Focus Distance to Layer. And that's going to automatically move the focus distance to that point in time. So I'm not having to manually scrub it and wait for it to update. And you'll notice now that the text is fully in focus. So what we could do is just set a keyframe there. So I could go into my camera settings and into my camera options and set focus distance. And then maybe we come back to round about here while the text is scaling up. And again, I'm just going to drop down to fast draft for a second on this view just to speed things up. And then I'm going to go back to the camera, select the camera and choose which layer we want this time. So let's choose one of the girls, Control click on her, go to Layer, Camera, Set Focus Distance to Layer. And it will now animate between those 2 points. Now, incidentally, while we're in there, there are also another couple of options. You can actually link the focus distance to a layer if you want to. And what that will do is it will write an expression to link the focus distance to the distance between the camera and the layer. Very clever. So that wherever you go, wherever the camera goes or wherever the layer goes, it will always remain in focus. You can also link the focus distance to the point of interest as well if you're animating the camera and want always the point of interest to be in focus. So those right expressions, this one will just set the focus distance and we can keyframe between them. And if I hit U on the keyboard, you'll see I've now got keyframes. And if I make that the beginning, so hit B to set the beginning of my work area there and N to set the work area there, we can go back up to our final quality and just render a few seconds of that to see how it looks with a shift of focus. Now I may not animate the shift of focus in this. I might just decide I want to keep a constant focus distance and allow the layers to do their own thing. And obviously I've exaggerated the depth of field blur here. But there is a rendered copy of this movie that you can find in the Finished Movies folder that you can have a look at. So that's a little bit about how adding depth of field at the end of a project can really bring it together. You'll notice that that really makes the text stand out now that the text is in focus, and the background layer with all those strong geometric shapes has really been helped to be pushed into the background with that depth of field blur. Now there are new settings as well for depth of field blur. You'll notice that the depth of field blur can be a little bit kind of sort of stripy, almost like vertical and horizontal lines. And that's because up till now it's used rectangular iris shape for the blur. But there are new options in the camera under the depth of field settings which allow you to change the shape of the iris in the same way that we did with the lens blur effect. So if you want to check that out as well, if you're applying depth of field and you think the quality isn't quite good enough, try choosing a hexagon shape instead of a square, and that will also really improve the depth of field blur. Now obviously if you're working with 3D, that's going to increase render times again. And the render times are a bit of a pain to deal with at times, but when you consider the quality and flexibility of being able to create 3D directly in After Effects now, I think it's worth the wait. So that's a little bit about adding depth of field at the end of your 3D project.